So I think we will go ahead and call the meeting to order. It's 10:03. If that's okay. So moving along the agenda and approving the agenda, first of all, do we have any additions to the agenda? I'm just going to give Anne a second to get off the phone just in case she had something she wanted to add. She's maybe on.
I think Anne does, so give her a moment.
Yeah. Also, are you folks able to see my image? Huh, interesting. So my video is enabled. Odd. Okay, so Anne, we're just waiting on you to get off the phone, and I was just calling, talking about approving the agenda and if there are any additions or changes to the agenda.
Yes, there are, but first could I ask Brittany, could you resend the email to Danuta with the link to the meeting because she can't find it, and I was trying to forward it and I was having trouble doing it. And my addition to the agenda was a request that we take a look at how we can get documents floating kind of among the committee members earlier than the time when the agenda package comes out, because I think a number of us have had a lot of difficulty trying to get through that huge package. And it doesn't give us a lot of time to digest it and kind of think about it and come to the committee well informed. So I'd like some discussion on that.
Okay, maybe we can move that. I don't know where is the best spot, Brittany, but can we add that to unfinished business or new business?
Yes, new business, please.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks, Anne.
And kind of an addendum to that is because there were reports in that package coming to staff, if we're wanting clarification on any of that, are we able to make a call to the staff, or how do we do that?
Okay, so we can add that to that discussion. So it's communicating with staff and what's the most appropriate way to do that, to get the information you need before the meeting?
Yes.
Okay. All right, I have those two additions. If there are no further additions, I would just ask that someone move to approve the agenda. Oh, sorry, Anne. Sorry.
Sorry, I got kind of distracted with trying to connect with Danuta. I do have another addition, and
Okay.
And I don't know whether it's relevant for this meeting or for a subsequent meeting. But that is, I noticed that the strat plan, the strategic plan, was included in the notes that we got to read, but the official plan was not. And I think for the non-council members that are on this committee, it would be really useful for us to kind of understand how they're different and how they're used. So whether that happens today or in a subsequent agenda. And the other addition, and again, it could be for a subsequent agenda, I think the whole topic of biodigester is something that probably would be important for us to have a good understanding of. Okay.
Right. So what I would suggest is we talk about your first request, Anne, we can add to new business, and we can have a chat about the official plan and having that added to the next meeting and maybe some kind of a report. And then perhaps we can bring the biodigester update forward as an agenda item to the next meeting. Is that okay with everybody? Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Good. Thank you.
Sue?
Thanks, Kathy. Just a comment. I'm wondering, because our official plan is going to be updated in this coming year, if maybe Jen could briefly speak to that and kind of update the other members on what that official plan is about.
Yes, no, I think that totally makes sense. So that would be a request for an agenda item, perhaps at a future meeting. Yeah, I agree. Jen would be a good one to give us an update on that. And yeah. Okay, that sounds good. So with those amendments, can I have someone to approve? Oh, your Christmas decorations look nice, Sue.
I was trying to get my picture out of the way so I could see other people, but apparently on an iPad you can't do that. It just reversed to the other side.
Do I have someone to move that we approve the agenda with those changes? Moved by Anne, seconded by Sue. All in favor? And that's passed. Okay, so good to have everybody here. So item number 3 is just reminding folks that if you have any pecuniary interest to declare, you can do that now or at any time throughout the meeting. And minutes of the previous meeting of November 13th, I'm sure you've all had a chance to review those. Can we have someone were there any questions or concerns about those minutes? Okay, can we have someone move that we accept those minutes and approve them? Danuta, and seconded by Bob. All in favor? And that's carried. Okay. No presentations that I'm aware of, no delegations, no correspondence. So that takes us down to staff reports. And there are some, one second here. There are some documents there that we can look at. I think we've probably all read through them as much as we can. We've got Zach on the line. If there are any questions, I know he was good to forward a lot of information that helped fill in the blanks. So are there any questions? Oh, sorry, Brittany, go ahead.
Thank you. I just wanted to take this opportunity to read a couple of submissions that came in following a publication of the agenda. So from our road supervisor, he shared a couple of additional projects or actions that the township has taken into consideration regarding climate change. So he says the township has completed shore stabilization on Presqu'île Road to combat erosion caused by high water levels. And additionally, that the township has been purchasing vehicles with Tier 4 diesel engines, which significantly reduce emissions of particulate matter and oxides of nitrogen. And I have a couple of more to go through if I can, Ms. Chair.
Mm-hmm.
From our interim CAO, from a treasury perspective, she says we update the furnaces in our public works shop from oil to propane/natural gas furnaces. We installed energy efficient windows and doors in the airport terminal building. We have also scheduled the Shallow Lake Arena to receive new energy efficient windows and doors in 2020, but due to COVID, this has been delayed until 2021. And one final, oh no, those are all my submissions. So I thought it might be beneficial, I just included the report or the emails from both Zach and Jen. I thought it might be beneficial for them to give a brief outline of their comments as well. Kind of while I have myself unmuted, I wanted to highlight the bottom portion of the report being just a brief explanation regarding the biodigester and the strategic plan. Should the committee want more information regarding the biodigester, which it does sound like they do, it was my intention to have Troy come to a future meeting to outline exactly what the biodigester does and how it functions. But I think it might be beneficial to have Jen and Zach speak to their specific submissions.
Absolutely. Okay, so in terms of those submissions, who is keen to go first from staff? Does it make, do you want to go ahead, Zach? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I can go ahead, and feel free to jump in and ask any questions along the way. So as you can see from the comments I submitted there, sorry, I got a phone ringing here. I included a couple things there. I hope everybody had a chance to look at those websites I attached. They're very interesting to be able to go on and actually look at the real-time results of the rooftop solar that we have on the two buildings at Chalet Community Center and Derby Community Center. A lot of the times those initiatives aren't really broken down that way, where you can really see the results. As I said, while we don't own them, we do lease that space to the company. You know, if you want to look at it from a perspective of offsetting maybe some energy that the township produces that way, I think it's a good initiative by the township that they took several years ago now. Those have been on the rooftops of those buildings before I was with the township. So I think those have been up there for 5 or 6 years now. And I like how they break it down. You can see the equivalent of how many trees you'd have to plant to offset that much greenhouse gas emissions. And you can even break it down. You can see what panels are operating. So the company that has them on the rooftop can see real time from their offices that if there's panels that are down, they can come and fix them. You can even see if you look at some of the recent data when we got all that snow on Monday, how they're obviously not as efficient on Monday, but if you had a particularly hot and sunny month in June or July, you can see the increase in energy production during those periods of times. And I think the last time I looked, it appeared as though this past year was actually a very productive year for those solar panels. So I also included the, it was completed last year, the township's energy conservation and demand management plan, say a mandatory document that the township has to release every couple of years. To be honest, that was the first time I undertook something of that kind. So I tried to encapsulate as many of the township's initiatives that we've sort of undertaken over the past several years. I must be honest, it might have been a little bit heavy on my department just because that's obviously what I understand a little bit better. But as with all the documents of that kind, they can keep being added to and made more comprehensive over time. Just to maybe pull some stuff out of that, just to give an idea of some things I've been working on in the facilities department. I don't think it's any secret that operating an arena such as the township operates at Chalet Community Center is a big culprit of electrical consumption. We have a refrigeration plant in the arena that obviously between the months of September and March when the arena is operating demands a lot of energy. And I think we've done a good job over the last couple of years with some asset management, modernizing, replacing, as well as getting staff on board for some very simple operational changes to significantly decrease the amount of energy that this building is using. Just to give you an idea, in 2016-17, between the months of September and March, the building actually used over 325,000 kilowatt hours of energy. Last year, we were down below 275,000. Which I think is a pretty significant decrease. It's about 5,000 to 6,000 kilowatt hours a month. We're down in the last 4 years that at this building. So doesn't necessarily say that we're saving on energy bills, but I think it's a good place to be where we're seeing our energy consumption drop. There's a few projects that we undertook that are the cause of this. We did a big LED conversion a few years ago. We replaced over 600 lamps in the facility, retrofitted with an LED tube. So we replaced T5 and T8 tubes, which were already an upgrade that the township undertook several years ago, and we further upgraded them. Didn't have to replace a fixture, just a straight retrofit. We did that actually through a Save On grant, so we saved money doing the project, as well as it has obviously resulted in energy savings in the building. I mentioned before getting staff on board. We're really looking at the fine details of operating the building, and that includes looking at how much the refrigeration plant is running here. And when it's more than just myself or senior management that are looking at those things, it's actually our ground level staff that are seeing how many hours a day those pieces of equipment are running. It's a really good way of getting staff on board, and part of the process of getting more involved with the programs that we have in place for making those machines run as less as possible. It can be very minor things, putting in procedures for arena heaters, where before we just let people come in, turn them on, and we could have the arena heaters to keep people in the stands warm the whole time they were here. Well, those things were running when it was 5 degrees Celsius out, and we had people coming in the building wearing, shorts and sandals in the early parts of the seasons when we were getting warm days. And we, sort of had to change that and say, like, just because it's warm outside doesn't mean you can come in the building wearing your normal summer clothes. Come in being prepared to dress warm, so we don't have to turn those heaters on because they put a large heat load into the arena envelope. And if we have a policy in place where we say we don't turn those heaters on until the outside temperature gets below 0 degrees Celsius, we probably save ourselves, 30 or 40 days of the operating season where that heat load isn't being introduced in the arena, and we have to get rid of that heat load through the refrigeration plant. So that saves us a significant amount of runtime. There's a lot of positive spin-offs on that, not just energy savings, but the less those machines run, the less they need to be serviced, the less chance of any breakdown or incident such as that. So, and yeah, just to get back at it, back to what I was saying, staff has been really good about taking these initiatives on, making them take ownership of the building, and being part of these initiatives to save energy. A few other things outside of the arena, again, with modernizing some of our equipment. We have 2 new vehicles that we use for transporting staff around. Specifically, we moved to grass cutting in the township, where we transport both lawnmowers around on one trailer. A few years ago, we were sending 2 trucks out with a trailer each all around the township. So we'd have 2 trucks, 2 trailers on the road running about the township. Now we can put 2 staff members in the same vehicle with 1 trailer, and we can really cut down on the amount of time that vehicles are out on the road. I think I can sort of end it there, and I can take any questions if anybody has any questions about some of our operations or some of our other initiatives you might have seen, or future direction.
John. Thanks, Zach.
Yeah, Zach.
John, you have a question.
Thanks a lot. I really enjoyed reading your review of the ECDM. I think that's something I really kind of focus on. So just a couple of general questions here. I noticed that in the ECDM now that's in place, that the target is 2% reduction per year for the next 5 years. And I wonder where the 2% comes from.
I think that mainly came from a standard goal that we see from some other local municipalities. So that was what was proposed for the most part.
Okay, so kind of linked to that, and this is something we can discuss more as we go forward, but I noticed in the bylaw that seemed to start all this from 2014, that they state the vision statement, and just reviewing that is that your vision is to reduce energy consumption and strive to transition to a carbon neutral future, and that you plan to do this 2 ways. So wise and efficient use of energy and resources, which you're doing, you've started on, and production of electricity, biogas, and solar, which you've also started on. And so something that we'll want to talk about as we go forward in trying to meet that vision of getting to a carbon neutral future would be how we set these targets in terms of the reductions over time. So that's something we can come back to in the future as we discuss this in more detail. And just another kind of technical question. I'm really curious as to where you got the conversion factors that is in the existing 2019 ECDM factor, where you convert electricity, natural gas, coal, and oil 1 and 2, as it's called in the report, into kilograms of carbon dioxide equivalents.
If I remember correctly, we're provided a template for producing these statistics. I believe through, if I remember correctly, the environment or whatever that portfolio is called now by the province. So municipalities are provided that template. So I think it's consistent across all the municipal reporting.
Okay. Anyway, any chance you can link me to that source of information? Because this is something that I kind of work with and I'm trying to build my knowledge of this, and I think this is an important thing, how we convert.
For sure.
Thanks. That's it.
Thank you, John. Sue.
Just a question about the energy conservation and demand management plan copy that was attached with the report. It is still showing draft status on there. So please tell me we've approved that through council and that's just.
I might need some help from Brittany here. I feel like it was passed.
Mm-hmm. Brittany's got it. Looks like Brittany's got a comment about that. Sorry,
I
Zach.
probably just sent on the report that I provided, so it just still has the draft mark on it, I imagine.
Brittany, do you want to clarify that for us?
Yeah, thank you. So the deputy mayor did send me an email this morning asking me if it had been formally approved by council, and I will be honest, it's been a bit of a morning and I haven't had the opportunity to check. So, but I will, and I will confirm with you. And yeah, so I can't confirm that right now, but it is on my to-do list and I will get back to you.
Perfect. Thank you. And any other questions? Anne? You're on mute, Anne.
Sue already asked my first question, so thanks for that, Sue. My other question is, you say an important item discussed in the plan is to move forward with completing an energy audit of the township buildings and operation, and doing that with a professional study, which will help kind of more targeted approaches to what you're going to do next. Has that happened, or is that still a to-do?
That's on the to-do list. There hasn't been any comprehensive energy audits done of our buildings.
Yeah, and that would also be operations as well, I would think, would need to be included in that. Yeah, all right. So I think that's important for us to kind of put in the parking lot, because that's a really important step to developing a climate action plan. If it's not been done, looking at trying to get it done.
Yeah, has there been any discussion, Zach, about bringing that forward as an agenda item, or a budget item for next year? Or what's the time frame for that?
I think that's pretty reasonable, especially seeing that it would fall in line very well with the fact that we just had many of our buildings that had building condition assessments done, and it also goes in line with even our recreation and trails master plan that will hopefully be adopted soon, and looking at the future of some of our aging buildings. I think knowing that information as we proceed through that process will help as well.
So is that something that we should bring forward to council as a recommendation from this committee, or do you think that's already in the works and that would be redundant?
If you're asking me, I think that'd be a positive step, making that recommendation as a budget issue for 2021 for sure.
How does the rest of the committee feel about that? Is that we're in favor of doing that? Okay. Brittany, how do we go about doing that then? Oh, you look like you're not feeling well today. Are you okay?
Sorry, sometimes I forget I have my video on. No, everything's fine. So we are creating a motion to recommend that council consider, what was the wording? What are we considering?
An energy audit.
An energy audit as a budget item in 2021.
Yes, please.
Committee members, yep. Okay, that's climate. Committee.
And I know this is about the time of the year when Cassie starts to look at doing a draft budget. So that's that needs to be a timely item, I would think, brought back to council. So
Zach, one more time on that wording.
An energy audit. I guess I don't know if you want to say like a comprehensive energy audit of township facilities and operations.
Township facilities operation.
Okay, that sounds good.
Oh,
Any other?
Through you, Mrs. Chair, if I can just read this motion aloud, and then we can have a mover and a seconder and call the vote.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Okay, so, and I am open to amendments as the committee sees fit. That the Climate Change Action Committee hereby recommends to the Council of the Township of Georgian Bluffs that a comprehensive energy audit of township facilities and operations be included as a budget item for the year of 2021. Do we have any amendments?
Sue, are you moving or are you asking for an amendment?
Asking for an amendment. I think I'd like to have it reflect that original energy audit was mentioned in the ECDM plan, and just reference that plan so that council is aware of where it's coming from.
That's an excellent suggestion. Yeah.
Sorry, bear with me, committee members. Okay, so I have added be included as a budget item for the year of 2021, further to the Energy Conservation and Demand Management Plan. Any other amendments?
Okay, seeing none, can I have someone to move that motion? Anne, and seconded by John. All in favor? And that's carried. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Just as a note, if I may, Councillor Coburn, or Chair Coburn, my apologies, I will include that on the December 16th council meeting agenda.
Perfect. That's great. Any other questions for Zach regarding his report? Anne?
Not a question. I just really like to thank Zach for the report, and because you've shared a lot of stuff that I wasn't aware of, and it kind of leaves me wondering how does this kind of information get shared with constituents? Because I think it's a really good thing to do to get people thinking in terms of climate and moving forward. And that's not a question to Zach as much as I think to the committee. Did we lose Kathy?
Sorry, I'm still here. I'm still trying to get my video to work for us and not having any luck. Sorry, go ahead, Sue.
Just an answer partly to what Anne was saying there about how do we get that message out. Part of our strategic plan was to get a person in a communications position that would be part of their job, would as plans like this are implemented and such that they get that message out in some manner, whether it's social media, whether it's on our website, whether it's just getting all of the plans listed in better order on the website, but that would be part of that person's job to do through the strategic plan.
Thanks, Sue. Any other questions or comments for Zach? Danuta? I think you're muted, Danuta.
We're trying to do the right things. No, I wanted to comment on Anne's suggestion, and there's a newsletter that goes out, isn't there?
Brittany? I'll let Brittany respond to that.
Congratulations. It can go on that. Perhaps.
Brittany, you're muted.
Sorry, thank you. So just a couple of comments in response to both Anne and Danuta's comments. Yes, there is a newsletter that is circulated annually with the, I might say this wrong, but with some form of a tax bill, whether it's the first tax bill or the interim tax bill, I can't remember which one it is. We also circulate a annual calendar as well. So these are items that we could start incorporating, you know, climate action information in, but I think all staff recognize that communications has not always been maybe as effective as it needs to be with our ratepayers. So we're definitely always open to suggestions, especially from, you know, community committee members, as to how you think we should be circulating that information and how we can improve getting the information out there.
So is that possibly an agenda item for another meeting, is to talk, I think, well, Anne was mentioning about communications with staff specifically, but perhaps in a future agenda, we can talk about how to communicate this initiative and our climate action plan in the future with the constituents. So rather than talk about it here because we have a full agenda, I wonder if it's okay if we move that on to the next agenda. Is that okay with everybody? Okay, excellent. And then if there are no more questions for Zach, do we have Jen on board? Yes, we do. I wonder if Jen could make a comment or two regarding the portion of the report that she provided.
Sure. Let's open this up. So in terms of what we do in planning to address climate change, our official plan right now doesn't contain any reference to climate change, but that official plan only applies to settlement areas. We are covered by the county official plan, where our official plan doesn't address issues. So in this instance, then the county official plan policies for climate change would apply to Georgian Bluffs. Additionally, when we look at when we consider applications for new development and redevelopment, we start with all of our policy review. So the provincial policy study has requirements for decision makers to, as I noted in the email that I sent to Brittany, protect natural environment and direct development away from hazards, whether they are natural or man-made. So when we effectively operationalize that, we employ the review and input from the Grace Harbor Conservation Authority. And quite often they'll go on site and they'll do an assessment and tell us what sort of impact the proposed development may have on any of those natural or man-made features, and whether or not the proposed development it complies with the existing policies. So we have different stages of review. We have policies that guide how decision makers should evaluate an application, and this is you can see this more in our settlement areas. So settlement areas in Georgian Bluffs have effectively historically been established. So we do have areas in the township where we see people wanting to develop, and we have designations in place that would direct the development to the settlement areas, and they're not necessarily ideal locations. So for example, in Springmount, we have a significant drainage feature. We have the municipal drain coming through Springmount, as well as we have a large swath of wetland that drains into the Potawatomi in Springmount. So while we have that designated for it's not going to happen. So we are, as the deputy mayor mentioned, we are going to be updating our official plan, and those are some of the things that we're looking at. In this update to the plan, we are required to meet a number of make changes to our document to meet a number of the recent provincial changes. So the land designations aren't part of this update. We have to actually work with the county. It's a much more involved process, but I think that once we have our climate action plan in place, that's going to help support our request to the county to change and alter some of our settlement boundaries so that we can exclude those lands from the plan that are currently identified as developable. It's going to give us a more accurate mapping of areas that can be developed. We do have policies in place, even though it's designated. We have policies in place that when you want to go in and develop an area, you have to provide studies like an environmental impact study or an evaluation from a professional in order to be able to get in there and develop. And we always have the requirement for lot grading and drainage so that the new redevelopment of a lot isn't negatively impacting any of our drainage areas, are putting unnecessary impacts on streams or the Potawatomi. One example that we have where we have implemented the climate plans, there's always a requirement for a certain amount of tree cover in settlement areas, and I can't remember offhand what our target amount is. So in Francis Lake, in 2015, we had the property owners of a number of lots came through, and they wanted to open up a road and develop. So as part of the environmental impact study, the environmental consultant came back and said, you're required to retain this amount of tree cover, and you can proceed with development based on having identified development envelopes. In addition to that, area that they required to be retained for tree cover, it was contiguous, as well as there was also the implementation of a setback to that required tree retainment area. So they were able to move forward with being able to develop those lots, and we have a development agreement that requires them to retain that tree cover, regardless of who owns the property. So, and if they, happen to not read the agreement or not abide by it, then provisions in the agreement that would require them to replant trees so that we can make sure that we're retaining the tree cover in that area. Let me just look at my note there. So right now, even though we're not, we don't have specific policies in our official plan, we are evaluating applications and approving development based on policies that are in the county official plan, and just the policies that are part of the provincial policies that are in place, as well as the Grace Sawville Conservation Authority, and even the Niagara Escarpment Plan. While our zoning doesn't apply to lands within the Niagara Escarpment Plan, our development in a way does. So for example, the Ontario Building Code requires that when you submit an application for a building permit, you also provide, it's what I call an energy efficiency plan. So you've got to go through and have your designer sign off on a sheet that that verifies that the proposed structure is complying with the Ontario Building Code requirements for energy efficiency. And some of that is related to like the type of insulation that's being used, as well as just the, I believe some of the building material, as well as the code requirements for development of that structure. And
Jan, I have a question for you, but I don't want to interrupt you if you're still going through.
Yeah, go ahead.
So in hearing you say that our official plan, which I know you're going to be updating in the next few months, although it doesn't directly address climate change, we sort of fall under the county official plan, and it does. But I wonder if our official plan, do they typically make reference to climate change? And I wonder if ours could, even before we get a climate action plan in place. It just helps legitimize the efforts towards mitigating climate change, and it helps to get the word out there too that it's something that we take seriously, and it ties into our strategic plan and so on.
Yeah, for sure. So we, in the update report to council, we did include that climate change would be something that we would add into our official plan. Definitely having language in there to support a climate action plan for the township is essential, and that's for the settlement areas. That way we can incorporate policies into our subdivision agreements that support the climate action plan that will be created, because we can make a reference to it even if it's not ready by the time we by the time the official plan update goes through. And then that way, that's the settlement areas are where we see the bulk of our growth and development and the change to the land. So that will help. That'll help us be able to come up with policies to implement our measures.
Mm-hmm. No, that sounds good. And I just had one other question, mostly for my benefit, but the rest of the group as well. When we have a proposal for development, there's this dedicated parkland donation or fee in lieu of. I wonder if you could just to highlight for this committee what that's all about. And from my perspective, it seems we often just take the cash, and rather than asking for parkland to be incorporated into the development. And I'm wondering what your thoughts are on that. And if we are just taking the cash because we've hit our targets in terms of parkland acreage, then does that money get earmarked somewhere for use later on that is specifically spent on improving parkland or expanding parkland or planting trees?
Yeah, so during the subdivision process, we can the township can take 5% of the value of the land on the day before the subdivision's approved, or it can take 5% of the area of the land for parkland. What we're generally seeing is that the developments are really small. So for example, in Kilsyth, it's a 33 lot plan, a subdivision. We did take a parkland dedication, plus we took cash, instead of cash in lieu for the remainder of the land, we arranged with the developer to prepare the site for us, so that the park was almost ready to go. it looks like we're moving forward with, we do have parkland money in reserve. So we'll use that money towards developing the site after we've had the accessibility committee participate in the design of it, and we'll have a better idea of what's going in and when. When it comes to, we have an application for a plan of subdivision along, I believe it's Balmy Beach Road. It's the old Leggett estate. So that's going to be 6 lots. There's no room there for actual land to be dedicated or deeded to the township for parkland. So we'll be taking cash in lieu. The amount of money that we end up getting is usually pretty small. I think the parkland dedication benefits the larger municipalities when they're coming in with a, it's a 300 lot plan of subdivision versus the 5 or 6 that we generally see. I mean, 33 has been our biggest one outside of Cobble Beach, in the last 10 years. So we don't generally get a lot of money for parkland dedication. In our Rec and Trails master plan, the consultants did identify that Georgian Bluffs has sufficient parkland at this time. And there was also the recommendation to continue to maintain our open spaces. So those are areas where they're pretty much left in a naturalized state. That is better for the environment. Generally, when you're getting into, and I think Zach can probably speak to this better than me, when you're getting into designing a park per se, you have to meet accessibility requirements. So you're looking at, paved multi-use trails. You're looking at the installation of equipment. The installation of the equipment requires prepping and altering the site and drainage plans and that. So that Rec and Trails master plan did make the recommendation to that, the township right now has sufficient parkland effectively. We just need to maybe upgrade what we have and continue to provide open space parkland for people, to enjoy. I'm not sure if I answered your question.
Yeah, I think so. I'd be curious to know the consultant that determined we had enough parkland, what criteria that's based on. Is that a provincially set percentage of your land, and does it take climate change into consideration? And I do have budgeting questions. Like, we talk about reserves, and maybe Sue, as well as the staff that are on, could verify, but it feels like we have this big pot called reserves. And I'm never quite clear on whether we've delineated within the reserves what goes to what purpose. It sort of feels like, and I could be all wrong, but it kind of feels like as emergencies come along or shortfalls, we grab from that pot, and there isn't really sort of a more proactive way of looking at reserves. So do we earmark a certain amount for climate change or for bringing accessibility in parklands? I guess that's a question for the bigger council, or maybe Sue could speak to that, or any of the other staff members online. But as it pertains to climate change, I do wonder if there's some value in adding a budget line for climate change, and do we do that through reserves or through some other means? Sue, were you going to make a remark about that?
Yes, I will. When we put funds into reserves, and Cassie would answer this way better than me, but when we put the funds into reserves, they are specifically earmarked for things such as the parkland. So those funds stay there and never get used or allocated anywhere else. I don't think we have anything specifically earmarked to climate change at this point. And that would be a good thing to ask Cassie about going into next year's budget, especially considering that we are going to want to have some money earmarked for spending for climate change based on this committee's recommendations. So perhaps Cassie could give us a better update on that at a future meeting. But when funds go into a reserve, they stay strictly in that spot. You also commented about where the parkland amount comes from. That was in the Recreation Trails Master Plan, and I don't remember exactly how they arrived at it, but I know they did address that in that plan, or at least I remember somewhere during that whole process that they actually recognized how much we should have based on population. And I don't think they totally said we had enough. I think they gave an amount that we needed over the next number of years that we should attempt to have based on future development. So that's as much as I can answer.
No, that's helpful. Thank you, Sue. Jen, did you have anything more, or are you open to questions from the rest of the committee at this point? Questions for Jen? Anne? I think you're on mute, Anne.
I've heard the term settlement areas used by Jen today, and I've seen it in other kind of reports and stuff. And I'm not quite clear. I think I know what it means, but I think it wouldn't hurt to define it.
Okay. So in a municipality, the settlement area is an area where the province directs growth and development. So, for example, Cobble Beach is considered our primary settlement area in Georgian Bluffs. So it's identified as primary because it has full services. It has effectively a municipal water and sewer system, as well as a storm system. So that's where you can put in a subdivision. In East Linton, which is south of Cobble Beach, that's where we've recently approved the Davenport subdivision. And right now those are on partial services. So we are looking to pull our the municipal sewer out of Cobble Beach and run it into East Linton. The settlement area designation allows for a variety of different development to occur. So you can have housing, commercial development. In Springmount, which is a what we call a secondary settlement area, we see industrial development. So that's where we see businesses and the larger warehouses. And then in Derby, for example, there is Kilsyth is the one settlement area that we have in Derby, and then around that is the rural and agricultural designations where we have permitted uses like farming. So the different designations outline what permitted uses are allowed, and then they're just defined within the boundaries of a settlement area is where you can have a higher density of growth and development than what you're allowed to have in the rural areas.
So then another question related to that. You talked about the building codes for settlement areas and looking at the buildings being energy efficient and all of that kind of stuff. Are those same codes used for the non-settlement area buildings?
Yeah, the building code applies to all structural development, regardless of where it's going in, and the code has different requirements for the different types of buildings. So, for example, a commercial or an industrial building has different requirements than what a residence would have.
Sure.
And then that's something that if the committee would like more information about, how the building code, the energy efficiency requirements through the building code for development in Georgian Bluffs, our chief building official, Tim Lewis, would be able to explain it much better than I can, because he works with it on a regular basis.
Fair enough. Thank you.
And John.
Yeah, just a question for Jen. Do you maintain your own database of the land use within the township, or do you rely on the GIS work that the county does itself?
So in our official plan, we have mapping that shows the different areas of the settlement areas, and then our zoning bylaw also maps out the different areas of the township. Technically, that mapping does come from the county. We don't have the GIS expertise in-house or the programs to be able to create those maps. The designations for the lands also have been, they're also influenced by provincial policy as well as the county official plan. So like, for example, our ability to expand a settlement area, it is done through the provincial policies and through county official plan requirements. So we wouldn't be able to just go in and expand Kilsyth. We'd have to go forward and make applications and provide documents in accordance with what the existing plans require. So we all kind of work together, but we do have we keep track of our different areas effectively through our zoning bylaw, because we have it at a scale where it's more detailed.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks, Jennifer. Zach has his hand up.
I was just going to clarify some of those questions about the parkland and the amount of parkland that the consultant. So I hope I'm not getting away from the conversation you were just having. But just to follow up on that really quickly, what the consultant referred to as typical amount of parkland, they did a per person ratio. So most municipalities is 3 to 4 hectares per 1,000 persons. They note that we are below that at just under 2 hectares per 1,000 residents, but you also have to take into consideration that the municipality is lucky in that there's conservation areas and a lot of other public lands within the municipalities that urban centers, larger urban centers, don't necessarily have the advantage of having. So I just wanted to clarify that right now instead of after, since I had the information right here.
Thanks, Zach. So you said we're around 2 hectares per 1,000 residents?
Yeah, 1.9 is the figure they came up with, and it's 3 to 4 per 1,000 as being a target range for most municipalities.
Okay, thank you. Anne? Anne, you're on mute.
I'm going to learn to do this at some point. If you included the conservation area land into that proportion per 100,000 people, what does that bump it up to, or do we know that?
I unfortunately don't have that exact figure.
Okay.
Yeah, that'd be a good question to give us a little more accurate picture. For sure. Okay. Any other questions for Zach or Jen from that part of the agenda? I just found all of that information to be really helpful, because I think at this stage of the game, we're looking at some baselines. So what are we doing? What are our targets? What official documents reference some kind of plan to reduce emissions and deal with energy consumption. So I think that's a really good step forward, and I just really appreciate staff pulling all of that information together for us. I think for the interest of time, we may want to move on. This was I think a fairly ambitious agenda, and I do want to make sure we get to John's report. Where is that coming in our... Okay, that's next. Okay, so is it okay if we move on? Is it okay with everybody, or are there any other burning questions before we move on to new business and unfinished business? No? Okay, so we have no questions from the public. Brittany? No? Okay. So then moving on to unfinished business. We were going to be looking at a work plan. And John, I'm going to turn this over to you. You were going to give us a bit of an overview of climate actions in other municipalities and examples perhaps of existing work plans. So would you like to take it from here?
Sure. And thanks. So my internet's cut in and out a couple times. If I lose you, I'll get Brittany to get me back or let me know, because I think what happens once I start this, I just see my screen here. I don't see you people. So that this is a PowerPoint I've got, and that should be up on your screens now. Have I got you?
Yep, I can see it. Looks good.
I can see it.
Okay, so this isn't very long. So this is just a kind of an overview or introduction, I guess, to the climate planning. And I'll be interested to get your feedback and just see how close or how far I've come from the mark I'm trying to hit here. So I'm going to start with just introducing you to some terms. Once you start in climate planning, these are terms you're going to hear all the time, and I think as we go forward, it's really important to understand them. And just a bit of my background, I'm steeped in the theory of complex adaptive systems and subjects like resilience and sustainability. And so resilience is something you're going to hear all the time, that we need to build climate resilient communities. And we also need to build sustainable communities. And so these two concepts interact. And to get there, from where we are to where we want to be, is going to require a fundamental transformation of our society, our energy systems, our transportation systems, our building systems, kind of planning that goes behind these climate action plans that are in place. And they're long term. I mean, we talk about official plans as 20-year out, looking out, but really in the climate planning, and right now we're planning to the year 2050. That's when Canada has recently stated at the federal level that we're going to go to net zero carbon emissions in this country. And just briefly, resilience, there's a formal definition of it that you see. It's the capacity to absorb disturbance and reorganize. But the picture kind of captures what it is. It's the concept of bending or breaking. And if you're resilient, you can withstand an impact, and it might bruise you a bit, but it's not going to knock you down. And in the film, we use a little cartoon, a little stickman cartoon to kind of demonstrate that. Well, that's resilience. Sustainable living or sustainable development is based on these nested spheres of environment, culture, society, and economy. And the concepts here is you cannot have a culture that spawns a society without having a stable and productive environment in which we live, where we get our resources, our water, our food, our air. And of course, you can't have an economy without a stable and functioning society. And now there's a lot of interdependence between these two, especially the economy and the society, as we've seen with this recent COVID crisis. When it hit us, it hit society, and our economy has stumbled. And so these are the concepts behind sustainable living, is that we're trying to build communities for our future, for our children, and for our grandchildren. And that's what they mean by a long time. And to get there, we've got to go from the community that's on the left of my screen, one fueled by fossil fuels, which has generated great wealth and great prosperity, but is dirty and polluting. And we're going to do this transformation to the one on the right, which is a green and healthy and clean air community. Again, terms you're going to hear as you go forward are things like planning through a climate lens, planning through a sustainability lens, And down at the bottom there, the concept of a complete community. And these are things we can go into as we go forward, but becoming a complete community is really an ultimate goal in terms of the sustainability of our systems. So that's sort of a brief introduction to the terms and concepts that I can explain at nauseating detail to anyone that wants to know more about them. And then when you start, you've got these two concepts of mitigation and adaptation. Jen referred to it in her report in terms of the county's official plan, in terms of mitigating and adapting to climate change. And just some simple definitions: mitigation are getting our emissions down to net zero and doing, starting that now and getting them into the future. And right now, our goal is net zero by 2050. Adaptation is actions that build resilience to climate change impacts now and in the future. So again, things were mentioned. Seawalls are being rebuilt along the shores of Lake Huron due to the high water. And as I talk to people about that, it's not just the high water. I mean, we've been close to these high water marks before. It's the fact that the winds now are much stronger than they were in the past. And an analysis I did of Lake Huron is that the frequency of our high winds, those are the winds that blow your hats off and start to do damage, they have almost doubled since 1980. So that's the kind of adaptation that we now need to do. We don't need to rebuild these seawalls for the past. We need to rebuild them for the future. In the future, we'll have high water, but it's going to have much higher winds. So that's examples of adaptation. Now I want to try something a bit different, and being a scientist, I just have to go there. And I want to talk a little bit about climate change here in Owen Sound on the southern Bruce Peninsula. And this, I'm a scientist, so you get to do this. So this is a graph. On the left is temperature. It goes up to 10 degrees. On the bottom is time. It starts in 1880 and comes up to the present. That's 140 years of data. And each one of these dots is the average temperature for Owen Sound, or our region, for an entire year. So you measure temperature every hour of every day of every week of every month for the whole year, and then you reduce them down to one number. The heavy line is what we call a low pass filter. It's designed to take out the high year-to-year variability and show you trends, and hence to get a system of climate. And to try and put this timeline in perspective, because people have trouble thinking over 140 years, but back here in the 1880s, that's when my great-grandparents started having babies, because all my grandparents on my mom and dad's side were born back here in the 1880s. And you can see from this heavy black line, this was the coldest period that we've had in the last 140 years. That temperature then warmed rapidly into the early 1900s, cooled slowly over the next 30 years or so, warmed again into the 1950s, cooled slowly into the 1980s. And so you've got these two long-term cycles on the order of 40 to 50 years where the temperature rises more quickly, cools slowly. But the key thing there is that the highs and lows of these two cycles weren't different. And so when you look at this over the last 120 years, so this is, I calculated up to the year 2000, our average temperature over that period of time is 6.6 degrees. So that's the average annual temperature here in our community and what it's been historically in terms of that period of climate. And some of you may know that, like, when you hear on the radio each day that, like, today is going to be colder than normal, what they're referring to normal is the average of the last 30 years of the 3 decades before the one we're in. So right now, our normal is calculated from 1981 to the year 2010, that 30-year period. And every 10 years, that shifts forward. So when I went back and recalculated all of the climate normals for the last 140 years, including now, I found that our normal temperature for those 30-year windows varied between 6.2 and 7 degrees. And in fact, our normal right now is 7 degrees, which is the highest it's been in the last 140 years. And I can tell you, again, to put this in perspective, that on January 1st, 2021, we're going to shift forward again. And this is going to be our new normal. We're now going to be 7.4 degrees centigrade. And so this is a clear indication that our climate is now changing and becoming warmer. And this is just one measure of our changing climate here, but it's an important one. It's temperature. Now, this is the same data, but I've just changed the axis here. Now the temperature is going up to 14 instead of 10, and we're going out to the end of this century. And I'm going to show you the projections going forward. So the green is the low carbon scenario. That's if we strongly mitigate and adapt and get down to net zero by 2050. So mitigation and adaptation would take us on the green line. And I think it's clear to you, and this is something that the students, I've been teaching this at the college for the last 2 or 3 years, they really react to this because they say, like, you mean, even if we do everything right and we do it right now, we're still going to change? And the answer is yes. So our best case scenario here as we go forward to the middle and end of this century is we're going to go from an average climate of 6.6 to one that's going to be around 10 degrees centigrade. And I can tell you, that's going to be a very different climate than our ancestors have ever known and anything that we've ever known. If we don't mitigate, we just concentrate on adaptation and we keep emitting carbon in what's called the business as usual scenario, we're heading to temperatures by the end of the century that are going to be on the order of 13 degrees, more than twice what we've experienced in the last 140, and those temperatures will just keep rising. So I wanted to try and put this planning into perspective in terms of our climate right here, what it's been, what it is, and where we believe we're going. So back to mitigation, here's examples that our local Ontario communities are using and looking at carbon-free transport, renewable energy, multi-person transport, and reduced energy use, some of the things that we're already doing in Georgian Bluffs. Adaptation, well, it's things like building design. I read within the last year that in Kingston, they have a new community center they're building, and council voted to build that as a carbon neutral building. It's initially going to cost them more, but they could quickly calculate that over the life of that building, they're more than going to get that money back, make those savings back. So that building design is win-win for climate and win-win for budget. Food security, local food security, I think the virus has kind of highlighted that thing. Disaster management, the extreme weather events are increasing exponentially. Just ask someone that's in the insurance business. Flood protection, well, we know all about floods, I think, in this area of the world. And the business continuity. So those are things that have been identified in other plans. But this is a Venn diagram now, and there's a really important intersection set. There's a whole number of things we can do, like urban forests, water conservation, energy efficiency. These are all regarded as doing both mitigation and adaptation. So when you start to say, should we mitigate or should we adapt? Really, we should be doing both. And we can start with things that do both as opposed to more polarized one way or the other as we go forward in our climate planning. So this is where most municipalities go. Not all the bigger urban centers. There's other programs that they have and do access, but the Federation of Canadian Municipalities, their Partners for Climate Protection program, it's largely focused on mitigation. It's reducing greenhouse gas emissions. And the adaptation is building, I got that backwards actually, it's adaptable and resilient communities. It's called BARC, B-A-R-C. And it's developed by ICLI International, Local Government Sustainability, and they work closely with the Federation in terms of these programs, although you can join ICLEI independently and just do BARC, which is concentrating on adaptation and resilience. Here's the PCP program that's a 5 milestones, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You start by creating an emissions inventory and forecasts and setting emission reduction targets. Now, that's the easy steps. A lot of municipalities get to step 2 and then they struggle to get to step 3, which is develop a local action plan, which is what this group hopes to do. And then once you've got that plan, you start implementing it. And the requirements are that you move through this milestone in 10 years of joining. So if we were to join PCP, say in 2021, we'd have to get through this in 10 years. Report on the progress at least once every 2 years. And there's a lot of support at FCM for doing this. Contact information changes, let them know, and actively participate in programs and activities. Partnerships and partnership sharing is an important thing, and that's why, like, I've gone to other existing climate action plans as templates for what we might be doing. Here's the BARC program, Adaptive and Resilience. It's, again, they've got these 5 milestones. Not that they're that much different, but down below is the vision for the future. It's strengthening social infrastructure. That's an important component. Medical and health impacts on people is an important component of climate change. Mobilizing climate science, advancing nature-based solutions, which a number of people in our group think is an important thing we can do in Georgian Bluffs. Linking the researcher with the practitioners, again, I think that's something we hope to do in this community. And facilitate opportunities for multi-solving. That's bringing in your stakeholders and your partners and doing this together, not trying to do it by yourself. Here's a quick snapshot to give you. So this is from the map of the FCM PCP, and it's sort of our area of Ontario. This is for all of Canada. And what I've done is, well, I think, first of all, notice that of all these little teardrops are communities that have joined PCP. And you notice there's quite an absence up here in our area. This one here, the blue one, is here in Kinloss. They joined in 2018, and this white one is Grey County. They just joined last year, and they're in the very early stages of milestones 1 and maybe 2. But there's quite a dearth here in Grey and Bruce counties. And what I did is I looked at the 26 of these municipalities that are closest to us, and I produced this graph here. And you can see that back here in 1994, when the program started, 2 municipalities joined. And then for the next, well, 26 years up to 2017, 12 more had joined. So a total of 13 had joined. And in the last 2 years, 18 and 19, this figure has doubled. And I just wanted to share with you this sense that there is a real growing awareness that this is something that municipalities absolutely need to be doing. Should have probably started some time ago, but I like to think it's never too late. Next, I'm going to go on and I'm going to make brief reference to the climate change and energy plan that was developed here in Kinloss, because, well, we were shared 5 other climate action plans from different communities. This is in southern Bruce. It's a relatively small municipality and it's quite a rural municipality. So I like to think like this might be a good template for us to start with in terms of understanding what they've done down there in terms of their climate change planning. And they have described and worked through 3 phases, and I'm just going to work through these with you. So this is my concept of trying to give you an idea of what a work plan might look like. So for January, February, March, April, May, they did these 6 things. They built a climate change working group. They did an inventory data collection. They developed a GHG emission inventory and business as usual projections. Based on their populations. They developed a climate science report. All climate action plans start with the state of the science in terms of the climate change. Draft and refine impact statements and define current conditions report. So that was the first 5 months of phase 1. Phase 2, May to September, May, June, July, August, September. I have to use my fingers. Another 5 months. They conducted vulnerability assessment via a survey to participate. So they did this survey where they found where were they vulnerable in terms of the impacts of climate change that were going to be coming down the pipe. And secondly, conduct a risk assessment and then prioritize these risks. And when they did that, they found that they were surprisingly vulnerable and they had quite a lot of their assets at risk. So this is a real good early feedback of this whole climate planning thing that municipalities get a sense of. And then they identified the GHG reduction targets. Zach's report for us and most ECDMs really concentrate on building facilities. Some include fleet management, but really you've got to go way beyond that. You've got to include your community. And in some cases, you know, where tourism is high, they actually include things like occasional visitors or short-term residents to the municipalities. And then finally, phase 3, which was kind of open-ended from September 2019 to the spring of I think that's 2020. I think I got that wrong. I think it was to the following year, was develop vision and goals, setting themes and objectives, conduct best practice review, develop and refine action long list, quantify emission reductions, identify metrics for monitoring review, develop, implement schedules, write, edit, and finalize the plan. So you can see that it's quite a bit of work and it's going to take some time. It's going to take well over a year. Some of these municipalities that started earlier on took much longer than that. But this then gives us hopefully a sense of what our work plan might be and the kind of things that we've got to address and the timeline in which it might take. And I'm just going to end here with a little bit. Some municipalities, so I've been working with the Niagara Adapts program down in the Niagara Peninsula. It's 7 municipalities that have joined together to address climate change together. This is the partnership part of this. And some of them have dedicated existing staff to be their climate change coordinator. Others have actually hired new individuals to take on that role within the municipality staff. But just to leave you that there is an abundance of information out there. And so this is from the Intact Center in Climate Adaptation from University of Waterloo. Now I know Blair Feltmate, he was in our film. And I had him up last year. He was the lead-in lecturer at a lecture series I ran for the Blue Water Association for Lifelong Learning. Here are 4 of their manuals that are out, guidelines that are all deal with flooding. This one here, Ahead of the Storm, deals with flood resistance for commercial real estate. Weathering the Storms concentrates on resilience in communities. Factoring climate risk into financial valuation gives the municipalities the tools that they need to be looking at to do those cost savings as this flooding is coming. So that is just flooding. You go to ICLEI and look at their mitigation guides, and I've just pulled like 6 out that are there. But notice up here in this corner, they have a tool. They've got the PCP tool here. So once you join these programs, you unlock and open up resources that we don't have here at the municipal level. Plus all these guides, the PCP protocol, having climate conversations, strategies for local governments, financing tools, this is important, leadership, handbook for local elected officials on climate change and legacy, guidebooks on quantifying greenhouse gas reductions at the project level. So there's a lot of information out there. We just have to have the staff and resources to actually look at them. And here's examples of their adaptation guides. Again, they have a BARC online tool. So you join the program, and you have to, of course, be a municipality to join. You get access to this. Finding the nexus of exploring climate change adaptation and mitigation, adaptation and biodiversity, how we measure progress on adaptation. And here's another guidebook for adaptation. So just to finish then, there's a lot of information out there. It's becoming aware, it's becoming knowledgeable, it's sharing that knowledge and then putting it into action. So there, that's, I'll stop with that. And I got to unshare my screen now. I think I did it.
Thank you, John. That is excellent. I know I shouldn't speak first. I'm taking a page out of Mayor Burley's book here, Sue, but I am going to say I really feel like that's the kind of presentation that needs to be made to council as well as staff. It's brilliant. It's impactful. It's practical. And I know that budget comes a little further down in our agenda today, but I wonder if now, if now is a time to start to think about putting forward a request for a budget to hire a consultant to go through those steps for us and prepare those documents that you made mention of in your presentation. So any questions of John from the committee or comments? Danuta.
Sorry, I was just doing this.
Oh. Yeah, a lot of work has gone into that presentation, and I'm sure it's just the tip of the iceberg of information that John could share with us, but that's fascinating. Anne.
I just want to say that I think Georgian Bluffs is so lucky to have John with us. So thank you so much.
Well, thank you. I mean, I live and breathe this stuff. I do it all on a volunteer basis. My work down in the Niagara Adapts is volunteer. I went down and introduced them to the concept of the modeling and how to understand and use that data. I actually was advising Walker Industries at one point when they started their they want their business to be climate robust, climate resilient, and that's a big company. Of course, most of you know they bought Sudsy's firm there about a year ago. So Walker Industries are here, and I have friends that work with Sutherland, and particularly have been advising them on the high water and impacts. So yeah, I love doing this stuff. I'm really glad people are interested.
I don't think we have a choice. I think we better be interested. We see the impacts of those high winds that you talked about along our shorelines more than once a year now. It's not the 100-year storm anymore. It's happening on a regular basis. Sue.
Thank you, Kathy. I'm just wondering if we could have John present that to council, say at the same time we come up with a basic plan, or how we think we're going to get started on this and what we think our budget ask is going to be, and kind of try to roll all those three things into one item on one of our upcoming agendas.
That makes sense to me, Sue, for sure.
Yeah.
Brittany.
Thank you. So I'm looking at our calendar. I think, just so we have a goal to move towards, and then we can schedule another meeting of this committee prior to taking everything to council. I think we should get to council with this presentation, and, even if it's just a brief outline of what the committee is intending to do and what we're already doing, I think we should aim to get there at the first thing in January, being the 13th or the 20th. I know Cassie is intending to present budget potentially in February of next year, so we do have to aim to get to council in January.
So that would give us enough time to put an ask in for a budget item to cover some of this cost for 2021. Awesome. Okay. Other comments, Sue?
Sorry, got to hit the right button here. The other thing, I did a quick look up online and I found the Huron-Kinloss report. And I'm wondering if that should be shared with everyone as well as with council, because I'm glad you referenced that one, John, in that it is local. It's probably more applicable to us than the Burlington or ones like that. And if that whole report could be shared with all of council and more in the midst, an extra 94 pages of reading.
Yeah, I think it's a good place to start, Sue, because it's local, because it's just happened, it's recent. I mean, some of these, I've spent a lot of time looking at Barrie, but some of these municipalities started 20 years ago, 15 years ago. That's good, but the things have changed a lot since then. So because it's relatively recent, we're also through our AllCat group are working with Hiba Hussein in Grey County. So we're trying to keep very close to the progression of that. So combining those two, I think, is important because we have two tiers here. The only two-tier plans I'm aware of is Durham region and Peterborough region. they're fantastic and they can be used as templates. But I think because Grey County and here in Kinloss have started, it's a real good reference point for us.
Definitely. Yeah, Sue.
I should just mention that I am on the Grey County Climate Change Action Committee. I'm actually chair of that one because the deputy warden and warden thought that would be a nice thing for me to do. And another comment on the Huron-Kinloss one would be, that might be a reference point to find out approximately what did it cost them to go through that plan so that we have an idea of what our ask should be from Cassie looking at budget next year.
Yeah, the cost is something we should find out, and I have not been able to actually determine it. If you go to the ICLEI website under their BART program, you can find that for a community of under 20,000, you can join for, I think it's for $20,000. Whatever the community size is, it's small. The bigger your community, the more the price is. The next one jumps up to 50, but we are the smallest category of community. But I think that joining simply gives you to their people and staff online. I don't think it actually includes someone like dedicated to what you're doing. And because I know other communities have actually brought the consultants in. Now this was pre-COVID, but you know, they come in and run their workshops and educate staff and develop reports. And I'm pretty sure that costs more than $20,000.
Okay, so I feel like we're a little bit under the gun here, because if we want some money dedicated for the next budget, I feel like we still don't have sort of a clear idea of how to go about presenting this to council in a concrete kind of a way. Any suggestions about how we do that, or can we get staff to look at the cost of this kind of work going forward? Sue?
I see Brittany has her hand up. I have a idea, but maybe let Brittany go ahead first.
Sure. Yeah, Brittany.
I was going to suggest that it may be beneficial for our council representatives, being the deputy mayor and Councillor Coburn, to reach out to their fellow council peers in Huron-Kinloss and kind of have them give us an idea of how much they spent on this project. And then we can have some kind of an idea moving forward at our next meeting how much money we potentially need to put towards this initiative.
Sue, do you have any contacts at Huron-Kinloss?
No, but I can probably find some. My suggestion was actually going to be wondering if Cassie, as our treasurer, would be able to reach out there, because I think Bruce and Grey counties with the different organizations stay in contact. So Cassie might be able to reach out to their treasurer and find out roughly what they spent.
Okay, can we agree to put that ask into our interim CAO then as a committee for her to follow up on that? Everyone's okay with that?
Yeah.
Okay, excellent. Super. So any other questions regarding John's presentation or moving forward in January? It sounds like we've got some plan to move that forward to council. John?
Yeah, just a comment that I could, if people thought it would be useful down the line, is to make a recorded version of that could then be made available to anyone at any time, which is something that we've started doing more and more instead of just necessarily a live presentation. As long as you got good streaming services, it plays okay. So that's something I would be willing to do. And I could do it based on what I just presented, but that's a first for me. So any feedback you had on changes or modifications, making it shorter, adding things, I would I would really appreciate any feedback people had, because I think it's important. The first rule in communicating is know your audience. I'm trying to get to know this audience.
Mhm. Yeah, I think that's a great idea, especially in this day and age where things are going to be more electronic. So I think that would be fantastic. When I went online, John, to look at climate data for this FCM course, leadership course in climate change that Sue and I have been taking, I noticed some of your graphs say Owen Sound. You can actually put in Georgian Bluffs and it gives you the projections for Georgian Bluffs. Now, it might be exactly the same as Owen Sound because they may be doing it in a wider geographical kind of area. But I just wonder if that those graphs, and I know Owen Sound is in our back doorstep, but I wonder if it can be made more specific to Georgian Bluffs. I know that we're all very similar, but we also tend to have this notion that we're also very distinct and very different in a lot of ways. So that's just one comment or one maybe suggestion.
Well, I can comment on that. The data sources historically are the Environment Canada weather stations. And up to 2006, we had a lot. And then with the new Conservative government, we had a lot fewer. So up to then, we had like Wyerton and Owen Sound. Since then, we have Wyerton. So we have one weather station in our area that represents the Southern Bruce Peninsula. Now there is a network of weather underground stations. GC Grace Sauvel, GSCA, John Bidorf, he's been fantastic at promoting and getting this in place, but that ends up being more detailed than you typically need or want. And they don't have historical time series. These are all recent. I think, the most longest one is just a few years long. What you find with climate, just to comment on this, is that temperature is pretty well behaved over large distances. So I have worked up data sets for 6 different locations in Ontario. And I picked Delhi, which is way down south of us, London, Goderich, Owen Sound, Wyerton. So to build that data set, I had to build the 2 data sets because Owen Sound went back to the 1880s. Wyerton didn't start till sometime in the 50s. North Bay and Sudbury. And if you plot these on a map, you'll see I've basically taken a swath through a narrow section of Ontario from south to north. And the temperature among those 6 locations and the trends is statistically the same.
Good to know.
Sudbury is colder than London, but the trends aren't really different.
Right.
Where you start to get differences is in precipitations, because it really, really depends where you are relative to Lake Huron or Lake Nipissing. And so the precipitation is much more local, and hence it's much more difficult to model. I'm guessing when you went and looked at the data for your course, you were accessing the data set that was put together by the Prairie Climate Center that's now with the climatecanada.ca site. And they use general modeling. So they went to an NRCan data set and used models that modeled it spatially. The temperature survived okay, but the precipitation is garbage for our area. So it's not that useful. It's got to be corrected. And when you look at projections going into the future, now this is a suite of 16 models that they're actually using, and they show you the average output of those, and they show you the high and low of those, so you can get a sense of the ranges. And the most recent iteration of this is you can get it down spatially, but you cannot get it smaller spatially than essentially the South Bruce Peninsula. So our climate is like Wyerton's climate, is like Owen Sound's climate, is like Southampton's climate, is like Tobermory's climate. These climates aren't different. There's nothing in the data sets that would let you distinguish them. Goderich has got a lot of rain, just like Owen Sound does, and North Bay. So those 3 locations, they show a lot of increase in precipitation compared to Delhi, London, and Sudbury. But those are away from the lake. Those are more inland. And the effect of, air masses moving over water, hitting land, dropping the water and become dry. You see that in the data sets here. I can talk forever about this stuff, but I think the information that we've got is pretty accurate. I find the historical information for temperature that they use in the models is good. I've built corrections in for the precipitation. I've emailed the scientists out there. And the problem is that the way they aggregate their data over space, and the smaller you go, the less accurate it gets, and that's especially true for precipitation. But our climate here in Ontario is pretty much changing in sync.
Got it. Yeah. Yep, that makes sense. Well, good to know. And thanks for clarifying that. For the sake of my final assignment for that course, it looks as though I used a database that isn't necessarily accurate. So yikes. Anyway, I was using climatedata.ca. And so, yeah, points well taken. Sue.
Just wondering if at a future meeting, I'm looking further than the January, if we shouldn't look at having Hiba Hussein come from the county and talk to everyone about how we could maybe work with the county, because they will definitely be putting a lot of resources into the county plan. So are there ways we can kind of backpack on them, so to speak? And maybe it would be worth, as I say, having Hiba come to a future meeting.
How does the committee feel about that? Is that an invitation we would like to extend for the new year? Yes?
Yeah, absolutely. And so in terms of this all-cat group that Marilyn Struthers is running that I'm involved with, and I think she said last night, we're up to 7 different local climate action groups now working with Hiba. This is the ultimate goal, is that the 2 tiers work together and coordinate and form partnerships. Like if we do this together, it's going to be cheaper than if we do it separately. And like she was relating last night in our meeting last night, that Collingwood is looking at sharing the costs of a new climate change coordinator with the town of the Blue Mountains. So there are ways of going forward, and building partnerships is really important, and building that first partnership with Grey County, I think, is a very important step.
Yeah, that's an excellent idea. Brittany, is that a reach out that you can do to the county to have someone visit? And should that be all at the same time when we go forward to do a bit of a presentation to council as well?
I don't think it should necessarily be at the same time. I think we as the committee have to go to council first and say, this is what we're doing. This is our plan. We do intend to reach out and work with the county jointly on this initiative. But for now, we think we need this much in a budget funds, and this is our plan. And then we have, I apologize, I'm not sure if I'm going to say her name correctly, but the representative from Grey County come to our committee first. If we find that it's worthwhile, then we will refer that to council as well.
Sounds good. Is that something you can set up for us then, Brittany?
Yes, I can do that.
Thank you. Okay, so being aware of the time, I wonder if we should move on. We have in the agenda some examples of municipal climate action plans for folks to review. I don't know if we need to have a discussion about those at this point in time. No? Okay, so they're there, and if questions or discussion needs to come forward based on those plans, then we can add that to an agenda going forward. John?
Yeah, in that regard, I wonder if everyone here has read the climate lens document I wrote. It's planning through a climate lens. It's 6 pages long, and it's an attempt to, especially at the end, to summarize the common themes that are in many of these climate action plans, of which I picked out 6. If people haven't read that document, I gladly make it available, and I think that's a really good starting point as well, because I've got a lot of feedback that it's been useful, and so it saves people from reading through hundreds of pages of documents, because I did that, and I wrote this little document to help get people started in how to think about it.
That would be excellent. I wonder if you could send that link to that document to Brittany for inclusion when she types up the minutes. Brittany?
Yeah.
Thank you. John, if I may, I would also request that you forward your presentation as well, so we can get that uploaded to the website so people can review it.
Okay, so
Members of the public predominantly.
So like do a recorded version of what I just gave you, or
No, the literal PowerPoint presentation, just a copy.
without any words?
Yeah, just your PowerPoint presentation. I mean, I think we need to do both. I think it would be a good idea for you to record your presentation as well. But, you know, because it formed a part of the agenda and a part of the meeting, we do have to have a copy of it on file.
Yeah, okay, I understand.
Do you have speaker's notes that go along with that, John, or do you want to just provide the slides for now?
I do this all in my head, like I don't write anything down.
Got it. No worries,
But-
that's perfect.
But the recorded version is probably the easiest way to do it. And it's you know, then you get the animations and you get what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
What I would provide to Brittany is a PDF so people can go through and see everything. But if you don't have the explanation of what's behind that, and you see complete community, or you see a side of resilience, I mean, most people's eyes will glaze over and they'll move on.
Yeah, I'm
So
just wondering
I think I'll provide a PDF to Brittany,
Okay.
and she can put it on the website. People can see the gist of it. But I think it's important that, you know, I actually would do a recorded version of it. Again, if there's no feedback on changes or additions, I'll do what I just did. So let me know that, and I can do that straight away, and we can upload that. I can send that to Brittany as well.
That would be great. Thank you, John. Anne?
Yeah, I think that the PDF version that you're going to send to Brittany is really for the benefit of kind of having the records. I think that having a filmed version or recorded version should be used to promote what we're doing and to educate the public.
Yes.
And not just in the records. I think we need to talk about how to get that out there.
Right, for sure. Kind of like the resilience film, it's fine to have it online, but if you don't promote it and invite others to participate, then it tends not to be used. No, that's perfect. Okay, so in the interest of time, I'm going to move us along here. So we have some new business. I had asked to talk about the budget. I think we've done that. I don't think there are likely any more follow-up items from that. Cassie will reach out to Huron Kinloss and get a notion of how much they have paid, at least initially, for their plan or their consultant. So I think we're okay to leave the budget for now unless somebody else had questions or concerns. And then other new business, Anne was requesting sharing of documents earlier. Brittany, I'm going to ask you to comment on that. I know it's a lot to read and there's not a great turnaround time. So I'm wondering if there's something that can be done about that in the future. Brittany.
Thank you, Chair. So the committee will have to forgive me. We have had a lot of meetings lately, so I've had to prioritize my time accordingly. I will do everything that I can to ensure that you have your meeting materials a week prior to your meetings. I am hopeful that our meeting schedule will lighten in the new year and therefore I can get to you guys sooner. So in short, my apologies. I will do my best to ensure you have it sooner.
Thank you, Brittany. That's excellent. And we certainly appreciate the time crunch you've been under for several months now, I'm going to say. All right. So the other agenda item under new business from Anne was about the official plan. We did have Jen speak to the official plan somewhat. Is that enough? Or are we asking Anne for Jen to come back and fill in the blanks for the official plan?
I think from my perspective, I'm good at the moment.
Okay.
I think it's really important that when the official plan is looked at, which I think was going to be done in 2021, that we have some input into that plan in terms of how climate action is included into it. And can I just go back to the sharing of documents just briefly, Kathy?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, because one of the wonderings I had, and it feels like kind of pulling the documents all together is on Brittany's shoulders, but I think there are times where one of us may come up with a document that we think would be really, really useful for the committee to read. And I wonder whether we can then share it among all of us and then it gets attached to the agenda package. But we don't wait for Brittany to have to send it out.
She's nodding, so I'm I think that's consent, so that's a good remark. John has also reminded me in the chat forum of another item that I need to go back to, so thanks, John. And Brittany may want to remark about using chat for recorded meetings and our policy, or if we're okay with that in the future, but we'll come back to that. So yes, this was in regards to asking staff questions, and I'm going to let one of the staff answer that because we run into this with council. I have questions and various councillors have questions, and we want information ASAP. But there is this sense that the information needs to be provided to everybody at the same time, and we don't want to be duplicating questions and overloading our staff with that kind of thing. So Brittany or any other staff member, do you want to comment on that request?
I would say, this is a committee of council, so staff are here to help you in any way that we can. I think Kathy is correct. Whenever one person needs the information, usually the entire committee needs the information. So I think we can move on a case-by-case basis. If it's something that needs a lot of detail, then it becomes an agenda item. If it's something that's strictly information-based, that's helping you guys form your plan, then I think we circulate the information to all of the committee members and treat it on a case-by-case basis. Like, it goes back to our last meeting. If we're simply circulating information, that's one thing. If we're making decisions, it's another. So reach out, ask your questions. We'll do our best to answer them to the best of our ability. Where we can't answer them and they need more investigation, then we'll include it as an agenda item for future discussion.
Does that answer that question for you then, Anne? Is that sufficient for now? Okay, perfect. Awesome. All right, and then the other new item under new business was in regards to the biodigester, and Anne had asked that come forward as an additional item as well. So if we can bump that into a meeting in the future and have someone come to give us an update on that. I was saying to Anne that the biodigester is a bit of a sticky wicket these days in terms of deciding on how we move forward with it, but for sure it would be helpful for the entire committee to hear just I think an overview of what it currently does, what it's intended to do, how effectively are we doing that, what are some ideas going forward, where are we at with the feasibility study and all of those things. So if that's something that could be done, that would be great. Thank you.
We can absolutely schedule that. If it doesn't happen in January, then we'll definitely have it in February. We'll keep it on the to-do list. Perfect.
Okay, so I am moving along here. I don't see any notice of motion. There's no closed session. Do we want to decide on a date for our next meeting now, or do you want Brittany to send out some dates and we respond with a poll? How do you wish to make that decision? Anne?
Correct me if I'm wrong. We've decided that we're doing the presentation to council on the 16th.
That the 16th is a Saturday.
Either the 13th or the 20th.
Okay, because and that's in January. I feel like we need to be meeting for sure before that, well before that, in preparation for that meeting.
I agree.
And then whether we do that by poll or do it now, we need to have a meeting prior to that presentation.
Would it make sense to try to schedule that on the 8th then, Brittany? How does that look from your perspective, in keeping with the Friday mornings, and not necessarily does that have to happen, but that would give us at least a week or 2 weeks, depending on the presentation being on the 13th or the 20th.
So we can definitely go with the 8th, but in that circumstance, we would be presenting at the 20th, not the 13th, because we wouldn't make the agenda for the 13th, which is fine. I think the 20th is fine. But yeah, we can aim for the 8th.
Does that timing suit everybody? Sue, did you want to? Yeah. Okay. So Friday, January the 8th, same time, 10 o'clock. Does that work for everybody? Okay. Let's go with that. Perfect. Whoa, that was easy. Sue.
Just a comment about the 16th. I think that was the 16th of December. Has something coming forward, our motion that we made earlier in the meeting. So that's what's going forward there.
Thank you.
Right. Yes. All right, that's perfect. Okay, so we have decided on the date of our next meeting. Oh, sorry, did someone say something there? No? I'm hearing some feedback then. I wonder then if we can consider adjourning. Can I have someone to make that motion? Danuta and a seconder. John? All in favor? Excellent meeting. I feel like my head's about to explode. Thank you to staff. Thank you to all of you, especially. Thank you to you, John, for that amazing presentation. And we'll see you all again really soon. Happy holidays. Bye.
All right. Bye-bye.